Alright guys, welcome to the chapter 1. So in this section we are going to be reviewing the book. So I was able to get the Django 4 by example, and we'll be using it and be adding more modifications to it as we go on. But firstly, we would like to look into building the first project on the chapter 1, which is basically building a blog application. And as you all know, Django is based on Python, so we are going to be looking at how to install Python on your system. I'll just show you a little guide on that. So you just have to visit python.org. Then if you are running on a Windows, you will see instructions on the download section for platforms, so you can download it on Windows. I'm running on a Mac OS operating system, so once you so click it there, just download it and proceed with that. Then once you have that out of the way, we are going to be looking into how to actually create a virtual environment, which is the next step here. So based also on your OS, you can create virtual environment in different way. We have about 2 or 3 packages, Python packages for creating virtual environments. So I'm going to be doing that now, and we'll be installing Django5, not Django4, and spinning it up. Then we'll continue with the book. So I'm here. Let me create a new folder and call it story chapter 1. So let's drag it to our code editor and make this large. Okay. So let me come to terminal. Let me create a virtual environment and let me call it .NET. Okay, so here I have my virtual environment. As I said, it's like a secluded environment where you can store your Python packages and not having to plug the system with unneeded third-party packages. So let's activate it and have it running. So as you can see, I'm currently in the virtual environment, and anything I install here remains here. It doesn't get plugged with the main third-party packages in my system. So let's install Python. Sorry, let's install Django. As pip install Django, we install the Django latest version, that's the LTS, and that is Django 5.0. Also, so let's click that. Okay, so you can see here we have Django 5.1 installed, and also we have some extra packages that come with Django installed. Okay, let's continue the book. So to check the version of Django, you just basically need to run Python -m Django then version. But because I'm on a Mac OS, so if you're on a Mac OS or on a Linux operating system, you have to keep specifying Python 3. The reason being that the Linux and the Mac OS have Python 2 by default, so you have to keep specifying that you're using the Python 3. Except you have to go to your system directly and change your Python to be Python 3 instead of it to be calling the old version of Python. So let me check that. So we have Django version, and you can see we have version 5.1. Okay, let me select terminal. Alright, so moving on, let's look at the overview of how Django basically works behind the scene. So let me show you zoom in here. Okay. Let me zoom in. Yeah, I believe this is small. Alright, so basically I'm going to be explaining this using the web browser we have down, which is my my Google Chrome. So we have a web browser, which is Google Chrome, and our web browser does what? Sends a HTTP request, and Django detects it by using the URL dispatcher, which we'll be looking into. Then the URL dispatcher goes to the particular view, link to it, and run the let's call it the functionalities that was requested for. So if data is required, it calls the model. The model checks for the data to check if it's available in the database. Then once the data needed is available in the database, then it passes back to the model passes back to the view, Then the view in return passes it back to the template, which what gives it back to the web browser. So let's look at an example. Um, okay, let's use the Python website for example. So I come here, I type in python.org, www.python.org. So if we take a look at the network section, let me reload this. So what you notice here is I made a request here. So I made a request to python.org. Then that is similarly what happens here. The web browser makes a HTTP request. Then the URL dispatcher in python.org identified the URL I'm making request to, identified like the path to which I'm calling the request for. And then what happens? It goes to the view to look for the functionalities to be performed. So when it goes to the views to look for the functionalities to perform, it also goes to the model to check if data is needed. Then if data is needed, it comes to database to grab the data needed, returns it back to the view. Then what happens? The view passes back to the template. Then basically everything that goes in here is that when I call these endpoints here or this domain, after the whole process that occurred, all this data that get returned is what the browser can understand, which is the HTML, the CSS, and the JavaScript. That's basically templates being returned back to the browser, and that is what I can basically see and understand. So in the back end, Django is running as a web server, and what it gives back to the browser is not the web server code, rather it gives back to the server a template code so that the server can display it in a way you understand. So let's move past that. And Django is known as the model template view type of framework, as you can see from here. So it goes from the model to the view to the template, which is just basically talking about how information or data flows when a request cycle is being made. That's a request response cycle is being made. So let's go back to our VS Codium and yeah, start up a Django app, a Django project, I mean. So we have Django admin, start projects, and I'm going to call the project blog, or let's call it my site. Let's delete this. I actually like starting my project in the current directory. So if you notice, I pass in an extra parameter which is dot. I'm basically telling Django admin to start the project here and not inside another directory anymore. So once I click enter, you can see that we have our manage.py, which is basically Django command line utility, which still does the same thing that Django admin does, but without calling Django admin always. The manage.py has more functionalities, to the Django project itself. So, and here we have our Django projects running. Okay, let me check out something. Okay, so we have our Django projects, and we continue with the book. So we've set up our project already, but if you noticed, we set it up at the current directory. That is why we didn't have an extra my site directory. We just had in my site and a manage.py like call it file, Python file. Let's look at the basic overview of or the basic structure of a Django project. So when you look here, we have the manage.py, which I said is used to manage the whole application itself, and we then have some files within here. So you have the init, which is basically to tell Python that this is a Python module, and we have the ASGI, which is meant to run asynchronous server, that's asynchronous gateway interface. You can also use it to run your project in development to make it async, and you can also use many other, or like call it, alternatives like UVCon. When we get to the section, you see how we use them. And then we have the settings.py, which is our project settings. So here we can be able to control how our project looks, from the template to security, to authentication, different things that have to do with the project. This is where we handle it. So we'll be looking at some of the files, some of the variables, and understanding what they do. So this is basically specifying our base parts for the whole application, for the whole project. Let me use that word. Then the security key is needed to just help with encryptions in production. Then the debug to true, we'll see this in action as we move on. Then the allow host will also be used in production, also see that in action. Then the installed app, the installed app are basically the apps that these ones we are seeing here are the ones that come default to Django, but as we start creating our apps, we tend to add them here. And for every installed app here, it has a table in the database. Okay, so admin has a table in database. Like call it, yeah, table in database. Then country, that's country.org, has its own table, and all the sessions has messages. All these have their own table in the database. So every installed app has a link to a table in the database. And we have our middleware, and we have the root config, which is specifying the roots, that's the root link to all the URL dispatcher. If you can remember here, and I was explaining the URL dispatcher of Django and why it is an MVT type of framework. So this is where that comes from. This is the URL dispatcher, and you can see it is located in my site.urls, which is this. So this is the roots URL dispatcher for the whole project. Okay, so here we have our templating section, and this is basically a list that contains a dictionary. This is a list that contains a dictionary, and you can see it has many of the settings we need to pass in, but the most important thing is this directory, which specifies directory for our project, for all our project templates, or we can still do it in any way we feel like. Then, so moving on, we have the WSGI, which is our web server gateway interface. So this is to run our web server the normal way it is. And the database, we have the language code, the time zone. So if you are building an application that is time zone sensitive, also put this into consideration. And our static settings and the default auth field. This helps if you want to build, let's say for example, if your application has a primary key and you want your primary key to be by default auto increment, this is where this is what basically handles it, because this calls the model dot the big auto field, and we also see that in action as we move on. So yeah, let's continue with the book. So we are going to run migration, and running migration basically creates a table in the database for all the installed apps we have above. So let me come down here and let me call this let's call it log.tb. okay, log.database. Let me save this and let's run that. Python 3 manage.py migrate. So you can see all the tables that get created in the database just by running the migration. And when we look at it, you can see all the table. I'm using an extension, a VS Code extension, to be able to look into an SQLite database, so we don't have to use a more complex method. So you can see all the tables, and we have different things in them. Some already have values in them which are created by default, and some of these, as we start using application, you get to notice that data get added here, data get modified there, and so on. So continue with the book. Let's run our development server. So we have Python manage.py run server, and our server is running at 48,000. and copy that. This the browser. So you can see our installation basically works successfully, meaning we've been able to install Django following the tutorial. So moving on, you will notice some things in the terminal, of which you can see here. This is the route I visited, and this is the status code. 2000 means I got a successful request, and 404 means the request is the thing needed for is not found. But we'll look more into this in a second. So you can see here, this is also another alternative for running the development server, utilizing the default settings, of which can also be done. And one of the special things about Django is the fact that it comes with a development server for you, so you don't need to start installing Nginx or Apache to run your projects in development. All you just need is just Django itself, because it comes with that for you. So moving on, let's create an application, and we are going to call the application blog. Let's come down here, close our server, and run Python 3 manage.py start app blog. Okay, so you can see we have an app, and we have an extra file here, which is migration, an extra folder here, which is migration. And apart from that, we also have some other different Python files that perform different use cases. So the init, as you all know, is to specify that this is a Python module. The migrations folder contains the migration files for each migration we perform to the database. That means whenever we create a table in the database, this is where the Python file gets auto created. The admins is to let's just say manipulate the admin portal, which we'll be looking into, because Django comes with the default admin portal for you. Instead of you to start having to build one from scratch when you're learning Django, you just basically need to use the default one already available, and it can help you to spin up your learning process. Then we have the apps, which we will not touch for at least the beginning part of this project. In the long run, we'll be looking at how to push the boundaries of our app. We're also working on this. Then we have the models to create models for a particular application in questions. We have the test.py to write test cases for the application. The views to what basically write views. So if you could notice, we have the major things we talked about: the model, the view, and the template. So this is where the MVT the MVT form of Django comes in. So continuing with the book, we'll be creating our first model for the blog, which is creating a post model. Let me check it. So which is creating the post model, and we're going to be creating the post model using the models.py, and it's basically going to be a Python class. So how Python does its model is it uses Python class that's using the object-oriented form of programming to pass both objects and also functionalities to them. That's objects and method. In the sense that you can be able to manipulate, you can be able to not just manipulate, you can be able to, let's say, extend the functionalities of a model in just the model itself. So you can be able to add functions to data together. That's basically the whole thing behind object-oriented programming. We're going to be creating our class model, our post model for the blog, and we are going to be returning it. We are going to be returning the title by default when visited on the admin portal. So let's come down here to the apps model, and we are going to call it class post, inheriting from the models dot model.